Hey guys, welcome to this mini training. Today I'm going to show you guys how I transform these arch brows by doing a tweeze, map, and stain. So first we're going to start by cleansing her brows very gently with a cleanser or a brow soap that's going to remove any dead skin or any makeup to make sure that we're working with a fresh canvas. So here I'm using an aesthetic wipe to go back and forth, and she has extremely sensitive skin. Make sure that we're not using too much pressure. And then now we're going to take the first step of our Thuya solution, and we're going to make sure that we completely saturate the brows. Before that though, if you need to pre-trim, you definitely can. I did not do it in this video because she likes her hairs fairly long, so we can double check that at the end if we need to trim again. And then here I used a silicone brush, and we're just going to slowly work the formula into her brows. And then keep in mind you want to keep a stopwatch on deck just to make sure that you're processing the brows at the same time here. And then I'd usually take anywhere from like 30 seconds to cover the entire brow. You want to work it in pretty quickly. And then here I am taking a micro swab and making sure that we clean up around the skin, and then plastic wrap to cover it. And this is going to help push the product into the hairs a little bit more by trapping heat. And then every 2 to 3 minutes or so, we are going to check the hairs by stretching them into our desired direction. And then here I'm using an interdental brush. And then sometimes I like to switch back and forth between that and the silicone brush, so that way I'm not scratching the surface of the skin, because the interdental brush can be a little bit harsh. And then after about 8 to 10 minutes, since her hairs are very fine, I'm going to remove the solution with an aesthetic wipe. And then you can also dampen this a little bit to make sure that it stops processing. Next, we're going to take our second solution, which is the setting solution here. And I just wanted to be creative and put some hearts to make it extra pretty. And we're going to make sure that we cover the brows with the same amount of product that we used as the first solution. And then also you're going to make sure that you time it the exact same. So if we did 8 to 10 minutes with the first solution, you're going to make sure that you do that again with the next solution. And then here I'm using the silicone brush to work that through the brow. And it's important, again, that we work this really quickly and then set it into our shape as fast as possible. And we're going to do that with the interdental brush because since this is the setting solution, the shape does matter more so than when you apply the first solution, because with the first solution, you're just breaking down the bonds, whereas this is rebuilding the bonds, okay? And again, I'm just cleaning up around the edges, but I don't do this on the top because we don't want to push down the tips of the hair, okay? Otherwise, they're going to end up being set in that position. And again, I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap to make sure that we really allow the product to set. And then we're going to let this sit. We're not going to stretch the hairs out or anything like that, like we do in the first with the first solution. And then after the time is up, we're going to remove it with an aesthetic wipe again, using enough pressure, and I slightly dampen it. And then we're going to move on to mapping. She really likes our brows pretty arched, so we're going to keep as much of her natural shape as possible. And here I am marking the first 3 lines, the middle line, the front lines, and then the arch lines. I do go into more depth in this in my online courses, you guys, because here you're going to see where I place the lines, but what's also important is how and why I'm placing the lines as well, because we want to really keep the end in mind when we are going to create shapes. And here I am going to create like a softer, higher arch brow, which I talk about in my courses, because there are 8 main brow shapes we want to keep in mind when we're going to create brows, and that gives you a structure and a process to follow. That way you're not guessing when it comes to mapping, okay? So here I'm creating the bottom of the brows. And also one tip here is when you are done mapping, I highly recommend having your client sit up, because it always looks a little different when you have them sit up, especially when you are mapping upside down, okay? So I always double check, have my client sit up, and then fix the lines there, and then I apply the stain. That's something to keep in mind. And then if you want to be extra careful, you can always go back in with a gel pen or a caliper to measure that out. Now I am taking my stain, and of course here I'm using Brow Code. This is pretty much my go-to brand. If not, then I'm using Noemi or Brow Daddy, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. And then in here I'm just using Perfecto Brown, and keep in mind if you guys want the formulations, that is all inside the courses, and we have that in the links below. And then I'm taking my wide angle brush and I'm just applying a really thin layer, working from the middle to the tail because we want that to be the darkest part. And then creating a very using what's remaining on the brush to brush upwards on the fronts. That way that part is a little bit more translucent than the rest, because wherever you put the stain and wherever it's darkest, it's gonna clearly end up the darkest, right? So I'm taking my micro swab here with a little bit of cleanser, and I'm making sure that those lines are very tight. And this processes very quickly, you guys. So if you're a beginner, you want to make sure you clean up your edges as quickly as possible. Okay, so we're going from the beginning all the way to the tail, and then now you're gonna see me work on her brows. She actually takes a minute to process stain more than most people, because I feel like her skin type is definitely on the more normal side, so it takes her a while to absorb it. And you can also, to make sure that it's foolproof, you can wipe a little bit of the fronts off to give you more of an ombre. And then, yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So here we're probably going to process her brows for about 8 to 10 minutes, and then you're going to work that stain through. And then lastly, we're putting on the regenerative step to make sure that her brows stay nice and hydrated. And then she's going to make sure she keeps this on for about 24 hours. It almost acts like a mask, a brow mask. And then we're going to style these babies into place and then conceal them. So here I'm taking my interdental brushes, and with the styling, I'm going about 70 degrees to 45 to 30 to 0 as we reach the tail. That way they don't look electrocuted, and then you can, depending on how the client likes them styled, you can either brush the tips down or you can keep them upwards depending on how they like it. If they like it more fluffy, then you keep the tips up. And then lastly here, I am taking my Morphe concealer brush, and I'm using the Buff Brows palette. And I just like a little bit of concealer, you guys. I don't usually do a very harsh line because I want my clients to be able to walk around with, a more blended line. So here I'm going back and forth on the skin super gently. And again, I go into depth on all the staining, all the concealing tools and angles and all the things inside the courses. So if you want me to really break that down, make sure you guys check out the course below, because there's so many other variables that go into creating super natural brows. So if you need that slowed down and you need more detail, then make sure to check that out. So here we're just finishing up the details, making sure that we add that concealer on the bottom, and then you can also add on the top as well, depending if you like that super defined. But I find that just adding that little bit of concealer gives them that extra oomph. And then here I'm working at the top, slightly going over it, using what's left on my brush to connect it to the tail. And that's the final result. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments below.